Hello and a warm welcome to another edition of To The Point. GDP numbers in the last few days have been making headlines for the new methodology, benchmarks, parameters, and also about the institutional responsibility. For all this and much more, I'm joined by NITI Aayog Vice Chairman, Mr. Rajiv Kumar. I welcome you on the show.
Hi.
So GDP numbers have been rolling year after year, but this year, more than the numbers, the methodology is being talked about, especially of the back series data. So my first question to you is that what was the need to bring in the back series data?
Yeah. So I must first start off by saying that this whole thing about back series and releasing of this data, etc., doesn't really concern the common person on the ground, who is much more concerned with her daily life and and the economic activity and jobs and growth, because this is a technical matter, but this is of great importance to researchers and to those who want to study the Indian economy. And let me explain why, which is that you have GDP growth calculated year after year after year, as you are saying, but then this is always done with the base year,
right,
and which is supposed to be 100, and then you calculate the growth over that, especially for the prices which keep changing and so on, and then you change this base year after a while. So what had happened in 2015, that the GDP growth, the base year was changed to 2011-12, and this is
from 2004 and 5.
2004 and 5, and this is done because you want to capture the structural changes in the economy, so that the share of sectors have changed and the prices have changed, etc. So the base year changes have probably happened more than 6 times since our independence, not even the first time that has happened.
So
but
you mean to say that the base year has been changing?
The base year has changed many times.
Many times, okay.
And this year also the same thing. And but when the new series was released in 2015, they did not release it beyond 2011-12, and they but then they had promised that they will extend it backwards to 2004-5 to put all that data on the same plan, on the same consistent basis,
right,
so that people could compare.
Okay.
And that has taken a long time. It has been waiting for 2.5 years. And as I said, this has been done before. It hasn't caused ever such a issue, but it has done so because I think some people have chosen to politicize it. Because there was a regime change, in 2014, and therefore, if you look at the data before that, that was that was the government. There was a different government in place, and,
right,
and so. But I can assure you, and I want to assure all the spectators, all the audience, that there has been nothing, zero political intention or motivation or driving this. It's been a very straightforward technical exercise that's done by CSO year after year and on many times before that.
Right. The political rhetoric, of course, is very unfortunate, which is happening, and that is why it's all the more responsibility to explain to the viewers that what are these new parameters, what are the new benchmarks. Like, for example, you said that the base year has been changing, and it has changed many times. But what are the other parameters which you have included?
So what the base year has changed, but but for the estimation of growth for each sector, the coverage has become much larger, from the previous year. So and that's a very big change. For example, in the case of, let's say, the industry corporate sector, the manufacturing sector growth, earlier it was estimated on the basis of ASI, Annual Survey of Industry data, which had only the factories and establishments there.
Right.
Now, since 2010-11 onwards, the CSO has used the data made available by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which is at the enterprise level. So each enterprise may have more than one factory, but all of that is consolidated in the balance sheet of that enterprise. Now, the earlier numbers I think were a few thousands. This number is 500,000 units have been covered. So the data has become much bigger.
Right.
Similarly, in the agricultural sector, in the services sector, earlier, let's say, the growth of telecommunication services was extrapolated from the growth of the number of mobile phone subscribers. Now, this is very big. It has changed and has grown by 20, 30, 40%. But you can well imagine that the number of the growth, or the number of subscribers is not the same thing as the amount of data used, or the voice used, because that can be much less. Because each subscriber may be buying 2 phones, etc. So now they have used the minutes of voice or data use, which is, and the growth in that.
Okay.
So similarly, I mean, I can go on, but the essential point is that the coverage has become much bigger,
Right.
and the methodology is now in sync with the latest global standard, which is called the System of National Accounts of the UN 2008.
Okay.
So our data is now completely in sync with that, so that it is globally comparable when it was not, and we have used a much bigger coverage to make the data far more representative of the economy than what it was in the previous series.
You said that, of course, the base year has now changed to 2011 and 12. So, which means that from now on, all the national accounts or whatever data calculations are coming will be based on this particular year.
They already are.
Okay.
They already are. The idea was to take it backwards to 2004-05, so that the whole data from that period, 2004-05 to 2018, 19, 17, 19, can be on the same level, can be on the same basis,
okay,
so that people can compare it.
Okay.
Otherwise, there was a break in 2011-12,
okay,
and that break had to be had to be reconstructed, as it were,
right,
so that the entire series becomes. But it's a very technical question.
Right.
As I said earlier, it's a question that concerns much more the researchers and the people who are trying to see how the economy is doing on a longer term period. Then it would concern anything in the present day policy making or in the present day business world.
But as what you just explained, that there are too many factors and such a widespread inclusion of units and entities as far as the corporate sectors are concerned. So is the confusion because of this, that maybe the people who are making so much of noise on the GDP numbers, they themselves are not aware of how inclusive the data is going to be?
The whole thing has taken so much attention because the growth rates during the UPA government have now been shown to be on an average 1.5 percentage points lower than before.
Right.
And that's caused a huge furor in the sense that why has that happened? And that has happened principally because everybody accepts this, that in the earlier period the growth of the services sector, what is called the tertiary sector,
right,
was overestimated. And there are three sectors which are principally responsible for this. One is the telecommunication that I mentioned, the other is the financial services, and the third is the informal trade sector.
Okay.
Now, unorganized trade sector.
Right.
And these three, the services sector, the growth rate was highly overestimated, and those overestimates have now been corrected by using the right methodology and the right coverage.
Okay.
And that has brought down the growth rate as well as the share of services sector in the GDP. But because, if you like, it coincided with the period of UPA government, being in power, this whole controversy has erupted. But as the Finance Minister, Mr. Jaitley, had said, the same organization had given on the earlier, on an earlier occasion, 2 years of higher growth under the under the UPA, and then there was no controversy. So I think it is just totally unnecessary, and those who are calling names to the CSO and saying it's a bad joke or it's hatchet job, etc., I think are simply denigrating a very professional and technical competent body which is respected all over the world. And moreover, on this occasion, NITI Aayog had organized 2 roundtables of very senior, the leading statisticians in this country, 10 of them.
Right.
And they had subjected this data to a very detailed scrutiny. And having done so, it was there was an agreement to release it, because CSO was now sure that this is the right thing to do. And I think everybody who was there and who has examined this data will vouch for the integrity and the technical competence of the CSO.
But indeed, sir, what you're saying is right. But all this political rhetoric and the noise which is being made by the opposition, do you think in the hindsight that because you yourself said that the subject is too technical, maybe it's because of the ignorance, or people don't understand really that what are the nuances, what is the exact methodology which has been adopted?
No, I think so. But and also as a result, because of that, the CSO has put out a very detailed press release on his website, which explains all the methodology, all that is done.
Right.
And I think it is incumbent upon people, to try and understand the nuances and the technicalities before, they start criticizing, or they come out in public saying that this data is this, that, or the other.
Right. But I would also like to ask you that, of course, Niti Aayog is the think tank, and questions have been raised that, why Niti Aayog and why not CSO, and all those kind of questions which have been coming in. What would you tell those people who are making a noise about the two bodies coming up with the GDP numbers? What is the exact role? I mean, we are working hands in hands. One should not see Niti Aayog and CSO separately as far as the GDP numbers are concerned. How would you really counter this rhetoric?
The statistical numbers, as has happened out more recently, when the Q2 numbers came out,
right.
the CSO made a press release, and that was it. And they do that for index of industrial production and for the inflation and so on. And that's a regular technical job that they do. The release of the back series was considered more than a technical job, because it affected large parts of the macroeconomy. It had more dimension than just being a technical report, and the Niti Aayog had provided the platform for it to be discussed and examined by these senior statisticians that we had, which is why CSO came to us and said that, look, could we be associated with the release of the data? And I agreed to that, simply because, in some sense to provide the Niti Aayog platform for a detailed discussion, even among the press, for the complexities of this whole issue.
Right.
But as you said yourself, the Niti Aayog, being a think tank, is a very large consumer of this
Absolutely.
data, and therefore, we and the Ministry of Statistics and we work closely together in a lot of things. I mean, for example, my predecessor, Dr. Panagaria, had headed a task force on the collection of employment statistics. Now, that task force made the recommendations which are now being implemented by the Ministry of Statistics.
Right.
So, it's not that they are, that we are kind of two silos and independent. In fact, some people will remember that the Department of Planning used to be a department of the Ministry of Planning. Absolutely. Department of Statistics used to be a department of the Ministry of Planning not so long ago.
Right.
So, so there is an inherent connection between the two.
Absolutely.
And it's not that by associating Niti Aayog, you politicized it and so on and so forth. And I don't know why this criticism is being made. And it's also not that we interfered in their work. No.
Right.
But this was considered to be a slightly more comprehensive and a sort of and a more broad-based issue,
right.
and not just a technical issue.
Right.
For which reason the two organizations came together.
So you feel that it's a needless controversy which is undermining this humongous statistical exercise which has taken place for the first time?
Absolutely, and I don't think there is any reason for it at all. And in fact, by just raising this issue, by implication, people are trying to undermine the credibility of the CSO, which is a real pity.
Right.
Because there is no way that it is the CSO which has prepared this data.
Right.
The CSO then requested us to have this vetted, if you like, and we did that.
Right.
And then if the two of us have come together, I cannot see why there is the reason for such a controversy.
As far as the implications on the larger economy are concerned, and especially coming as it does during the election year, what would you see the larger implications on the economy of these numbers of the back series data?
There is no implication at all,
okay.
None at all. Because as I said earlier to you, we are more concerned with what's happening today and what's likely to happen tomorrow.
Right.
This was more a technical exercise just to clean up the statistical system and series, right, which would be of great interest to the researchers and to other institutions rather than to the common person who is out there now involved in the states and so on.
But as the political circles do see that economy becomes a big rallying point during elections, as it always is.
But it is the current performance of the economy which becomes a rallying point.
Right.
And to that extent, the new number that's been announced, which is 7.1% growth of second quarter of GDP, is far more relevant, right, than anything else. Now again, if there was a political motive or if the CSO had been controlled politically, the government could have told them to not give out the lower number than Q1.
Right, absolutely.
Because 1.1% lower.
Right.
But the fact is that CSO is independent, so they have shown that in second quarter of economic activity has come down, and which while disappointing is the fact, and and has told us that we need to work harder to push up the growth rate again.
Okay.
Now this number, so see this number and the numbers the third and fourth quarter are far more relevant for the common person, and even politically are far more relevant, because they affect the life of the persons today. And the back series, what happened in 2005-6, whether the real number was this, that or the other, has zero implication for anything at this time.
Right. But this new system which you've just spoken about, I was just reading the terms, like, the new system uses the GVA, the NVA, and there is also a term called MCA database 21, which obviously the common people will not understand. But how do you really assimilate all these three terms for a commoner to understand in terms of growth of the country, in terms of GDP? How does one look at it?
They're very different things,
Okay.
I must confess, and I don't think we should go into these technicalities.
Okay.
Because GVA is gross value added, which plus the taxes is equal to gross domestic product.
Okay.
Which was earlier, GVA was earlier called the GDP at factor cost.
Okay.
And the GDP is market. So all of those, I think, are very. MCA 21 is the data released by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs for 500,000 companies, which is now being used by the CSO to estimate the growth rate of the manufacturing sector.
But the data?
But all of this, I think, are not to the interest of the common man, and
Right.
I think therefore the common man must assure herself that what's happening here is an improvement in data collection,
Okay.
is an improvement in data analysis, and is an improvement in the methodology by which you collect and analyze the data.
Right.
So that what you have today and going forward
Right.
is a much better reflection of the economic activity than what you've had in the past.
So this new methodology which has been adopted is an answer to all those negative voices which said that India is very poor with data collection, India is very poor with adopting new methodology. So that's an answer to them.
Absolutely, that's it. And I think this is really where it counts, which is that we have now adopted a system whereby our economic activity is much better reflected in the numbers. And given the greater formalization of the economy in the last 4 years, because of the passage of GST and because of the demonetization, etc., we are now much more able to understand the actual movements in the economy than we were earlier. And I think that makes for good policy making as well.
Absolutely. So as you said that we are on a good footing as far as the economy is concerned. So economy is also again concerned with the jobs.
Yes.
So when you come to the jobs front, so all those people who are saying that it's a jobless growth, what is the actual picture I would like to understand from you?
I don't see where this is coming from. And those who talk about jobless growth always fail to give you any data on that, because they just don't produce any data. It's just an assertion that keeps going on, and that the people have estimated job growth from the basis of EPFO data.
Right.
And the two authors there who've done that and who estimated that in 2017-18 we had generated 70 lakh jobs, and then the EPFO keeps giving data on a monthly level as to how many new jobs have been created. Now, the criticism for that is that, look, this is not all new jobs, because it could well be the formalization of jobs. And let me explain that to the viewers, which is that EPFO is compulsory for companies or firms which employ 20 employees or more. Now, if you are employing 19 today, you don't go into
Right.
the EPFO, you don't pay that contribution. But if tomorrow you employ 20, then you get included in that data. So the people are saying, the critics are saying, oh, the additionality is only 1, not 20. And is the EPFO counting all 20?
Okay.
Now, it would have been correct if we had counted. But you see, what happening is that EPFO also gives the number of companies which are joining the data for the first time every month.
Right.
Yes. Now, what you could do therefore, that you can assume that all those who are joining the data base for the first time, the entire job that is there is to be excluded from the new jobs.
Right.
You can assume that.
Yeah.
Now, that's the best you can do, and that can be done. And even if you do that, you come out with Ghosh and Ghosh has shown that about 5 to 6 lakh jobs are being created every month, even after making this correction. So, I do not see where this thing is coming from, that there is jobless growth. Now, there is lower growth of so called permanent public sector government jobs. Now, that is where all the time this is talked about, that look, when the railways advertise, so many millions have applied, etc. But that is because the nature of jobs are changing in the economy, and we are not able to take them into account. Like for example, all the Ola and the Ubers and the delivery boys, who deliver food to your place, or or the new forms of logistics, e-commerce. None of that is estimated anywhere in our employment data. And last thing is that this jobless growth should be reflected in a lowering of the real wage. If there is unemployment, wage rate should go down.
And that is not happening.
That's not happening. So where is the evidence? And I think this is one part where I'm sad, but it is totally politicized. Because people know this, and the farmers, people know, are the kind of Achilles heel for any government, because these are the constituencies which get which can draw a lot of emotions, and so there is a purpose. There is a concerted purpose in my support, that this, without any evidence, you keep asserting this.
But so when it comes to job numbers, when it comes to GDP, and the way this political whipping up of frenzy is happening in the political circle, what can we do at the moment to stop this and tell the people that, look, this is the actual picture? I mean, as we are doing it on Rajya Sabha TV.
This is what we can do, is what we are doing now, and maybe Niti Aayog should come out more in the public domain and talk about these things. We do that also, but I mean the point is that that's only that much we can do. If some people have made up their mind because of serving their own some interest or the other, that they will continue to assert on particular thing, then well, I mean there you go. But the fact remains that this economy has been growing, is now the fastest growing economy in the world, and that the manufacturing sector, agriculture sector has done better, but most importantly, that the fruits of this growth are now reaching the common people much more due to the Prime Minister's welfare scheme, the flagship scheme, than they've ever done in the past, and that this government is sort of much less leakages. The economy is much more formalized. There is far less corruption, and there is less generation of black money than has been in the past. Now, this is the positive narrative that I think people should understand, rather than get hoodwinked by this continuous talk of jobless growth and so on.
Mr. Kumar, when I had interviewed you last year, you in our interview had spoken about a household survey which Niti Ayog was going to carry out, and that was about to come with some very credible job numbers.
Yes.
So, is that the process still underway? When are we expecting that?
It is underway, and it's not Niti Ayog but the CSO which is implementing this household survey. I'm told it's near completion, and we should see the data which will put to rest all these controversies once it comes out, because it's a quarterly household survey of employment for the urban areas. So every quarter they are going out to several thousand households to ask about as a sample, and once a year rural employment survey that they will do. I'm hoping that this data will be out early on in the next year.
And so before the general elections?
I hope so. I hope so.
So as a footnote to our interview, so there's nothing to worry as far as the job numbers are concerned and the GDP numbers?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. The only thing that I would be worried is that why isn't GDP growth rate even higher?
Okay.
Because India needs that. You need to sustain a growth rate of 8% plus. But I'm sure that with all that's happened in these 4 years, we will be able to achieve that in the coming years.
And I'm sure you're going to have a hard time calculating it year after year.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Mr.
As
Kumar.
always. Thank you so much for having us.
So that's it on this episode of To The Point. See you next time with another personality. Goodbye and thanks for watching.